At the dinner table after the funeral, as the candlelight flickered across the wooden surface, Brianna locked eyes with her mother-in-law and uttered words that could chill anyone who heard them. "Now that your husband is gone, pack your things and never come back." Sitting right beside her, Jacob, the son Ellie Carter had raised for 43 years, only nodded in agreement. In that moment, the heart of a mother already shattered by the loss of her husband was torn apart once more by her own flesh and blood. Ellie was no stranger to hardship. She was the former head nurse of Santa Rosa Community Hospital, a woman who had dedicated her entire life to saving lives and caring for patients. The setting was the two-story wooden home in Sonoma County, filled with 33 years of marital memories. But just 1 week after the funeral, that very home had become a battlefield. The ones standing against her were not outsiders, but Brianna, her sharp, calculating daughter-in-law, and Jacob, the son now trapped by financial ruin and his wife's control. This story is not merely a family tragedy, it is one of the most painful revenge stories. An elderly mother forced out of her own home, facing the risk of losing her autonomy and dignity. But this was only the beginning, because behind Ellie's silence lay secrets, documents, and a hidden strength that would turn everything upside down. And what they never expected was, this was only the beginning. In the town of Santa Rosa, everyone fondly called Ellie Carter, by the nickname Nurse Ellie. For more than 40 years, she had served as the head nurse at the community hospital. A woman with hands gentle enough to comfort a crying child, yet strong as steel when faced with an emergency. She knew how to calm chaos in an operating room, how to keep order when panic rose, and most of all, how to maintain discipline down to the smallest detail. That habit had become her very nature. Cautious, meticulous, and always prepared for the unexpected. Her 33-year marriage to Robert Carter, the husband who had passed just 1 week before that fateful dinner, was itself a testament to endurance and devotion. Robert owned a small local construction company, Carter Construction. In Ellie's eyes, he was not just her husband, but a man who always thought ahead. He often told her, "In medicine, you guard each second of life. In business, I have to prepare for every tomorrow." She would laugh at the line, never realizing it would prove prophetic. After long shifts, Ellie had a ritual. She wrote in her journal at the oak table in the living room. On the table always sat a silver-framed wedding photo and a small glass jar filled with dried lavender sprigs. The scent lulled her to sleep. Another habit was keeping records locked neatly in a wooden cabinet, color-coded and perfectly ordered. It was the legacy of a head nurse. Never allow errors in documentation. Her only son, Jacob, had once been her pride. As a child, he would run to the hospital to show her his messy little drawings. But adulthood brought change. Failed ventures and mounting debts hardened him, made him bitter. Brianna, his wife, was the opposite. As a paralegal in real estate, she quickly recognized her husband's weakness and turned it into control. Ellie tried to connect with her daughter-in-law, but Brianna kept a cold distance. At family dinners, Brianna's voice always seemed to overpower the room. What Ellie didn't know was that before his death, Robert had taken an extraordinary step. He created the Carter Construction Trust 5 years earlier, naming Ellie as the sole beneficiary. Quietly, he also pulled a $350,000 home equity loan from their house and placed the funds directly into the trust. And as a final safeguard, every loan Jacob took from the company was documented with interest and due dates. Robert would sometimes joke when Ellie signed papers absent-mindedly. "Just paperwork, makes everything run smoother." She trusted him, never asking questions. She had no idea those papers would one day form a fortress protecting her survival. One summer afternoon, Ellie sat with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the sunset spread over the lavender in her yard. Tom Bradley, the longtime foreman, stopped by with a basket of oranges from his farm. "Mrs. Ellie, Mr. Robert told me, whenever something happens, I'm to take orders from you. He was very clear about that." Ellie paused, smiled faintly, but felt a flicker of unease. "Me? I don't know anything about construction." Tom shook his head. "He said the paperwork was all set. I trust him." Ellie carefully noted Tom's words in her journal, but closed the book, convincing herself it was just a misunderstanding. She told herself her only duty was to handle the funeral, to hold on to Robert's memory. But when she opened the file cabinet looking for insurance papers, she found a thick, red-marked envelope with Robert's familiar handwriting. Open only if needed. Her heartbeat quickened, hands trembling as she set the envelope back. That night, at the oak table with lavender in the air, Ellie couldn't sleep. The image of Jacob and Brianna sitting at the dinner table with their distant looks replayed in her mind. Tom's voice echoed. The paperwork was all set. And as her eyes fell on the silver wedding photo, a chilling thought surfaced. Robert had known something all along. But what? Ellie had no idea that within the coming week, those very papers would become the only weapons shielding her from a devastating betrayal. That evening, the two-story wooden home, once filled with laughter, had turned cold. The long oak dining table in the center of the room, where Robert had always sat at the head, now held only an empty chair. The warm glow of the lamp above fell on 3 faces, but instead of comfort, it pressed the air into something suffocating. Ellie sat silently, her frail hands clutching the edge of the tablecloth, as if it were the last thing anchoring her to reality. Brianna lifted her chin, her eyes sharp, her voice cutting with precision. Now that he's gone, pack your things and don't ever come back. The words landed on the table like a blade, cold and merciless. Jacob, Ellie's son, the same boy who used to cling to her legs when he feared the dark, now sat motionless, only nodding in agreement with his wife. No protest, no trace of sympathy. Ellie trembled. Her throat tightened, eyes fixed on the empty chair where Robert once sat. She remembered vividly. Just a week ago, his laughter filled this room, his hands squeezing hers after dinner, whispering that she'd never have to worry about the future. Yet now, in the same space, her own son and daughter-in-law had declared her erased. Jacob, do you really think this? Her voice cracked, eyes wet as she stared at him. Jacob avoided her gaze, muttering, Brianna's right, Mom. This house is too big, you can't keep it up. You should find somewhere else, somewhere easier for you. Ellie's heart clenched tight. This house, every brick, every window, carried 33 years of marriage. She had tended the flowers, chosen the curtains, crafted a home, and now it was being reduced to a transaction. Brianna wasn't speaking idly. She had already prepared. Pulling out her phone, she spoke evenly like reading a checklist. I've contacted a realtor. Next week they'll come take pictures. If you cooperate, the sale will move much faster. Ellie felt heat flood her face. Her trembling hand set the fork down sharply. The grief of losing Robert had not even dulled, and now betrayal piled on top of it. But what pierced deepest was Jacob's silence. He wouldn't even look at her, only stared into his plate as if she didn't exist. Later that night, back in her room, Ellie opened her phone and saw a message from Jacob, sent just hours before, cutting deeper than any blade. Evidence. Text message, 6:45 p.m. Content. Mom, Brianna has already spoken with the realtor. It'll be better for you if you move soon. 2 weeks is enough to sort things out. Ellie collapsed onto the bed, vision blurred with tears. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to leave the home she had lived in for half her life. 2 weeks to abandon every memory with Robert. The pain was indescribable. The wedding photo on her nightstand seemed to gaze back at her, reminding her that a lifetime of devotion had been buried in a single evening. She wanted to scream, to shatter the phone, but instead she clutched the frame to her chest, whispering, Robert, they're throwing me out of our home. On the dresser, the red-marked envelope with Robert's handwriting still sat untouched, waiting. In that moment, Ellie felt an eerie premonition that Robert had left something more than just love behind. But she didn't yet know what it was. She closed her eyes, fighting back panic. Deep inside, though, she knew one truth. This betrayal was only the beginning, because something far worse was waiting ahead. But worse was coming. After that fateful dinner, Ellie thought she had already heard the cruelest words a mother could endure. But within just a few days, things began to escalate. Small incidents came one after another, like relentless waves, crashing down on a woman who had only just lost her husband, leaving her increasingly isolated and powerless. On Monday morning, before the sunlight had fully spread across the lavender garden, Ellie discovered a large envelope on her front step. Inside was a coldly printed document, no handwritten words, only the heading, Notice of Intended Sale, with a 2-week deadline. At the bottom of the page, in sharp ink, was Brianna's signature. Reaction. Ellie sank down on the porch steps, the paper trembling in her hands. She muttered, 2 weeks. They're giving me just 2 weeks to erase an entire lifetime? She bit her lip until it bled, the pain sharper than any needle she had ever pressed into a patient's skin. For a fleeting moment, she wanted to run to Jacob's house, knock on his door and demand, "Where is my son? The little boy who once clung to me when he was scared." But the silence of the neighborhood answered her instead, wrapping her in despair. Minor outcome. The document remained on the dining table, a constant threat each time she walked past. It reminded her that the clock was ticking, and her presence in her own home was being measured in days. The following afternoon, Brianna arrived with 2 strange men. One held a measuring tape, the other a camera. Without knocking, they strode into the foyer as if Ellie had already vanished. Brianna pointed out each space like a tour guide. The living room is too bright, pull the curtains. The kitchen needs to be cleared for the photos. Her tone was calm, businesslike, no different than briefing office staff. Reaction. Ellie was stunned. She tried to keep her voice steady. "This is still my house. You can't just walk in." But Brianna cut her off coolly. "It'll be easier if you cooperate. The sale will move faster. This house no longer suits you." Behind her, Jacob stood silent, his head bowed as though he had already cast his vote. Ellie's heart fractured a little more. Minor outcome. The next day, Ellie received a message. Evidence. Call log 3:22 p.m. Content. "Mrs. Carter, this is the Realtor. I'll meet you Thursday to photograph the entire house. Please be ready." The feeling of being erased became undeniable. Ellie realized they didn't just want to seize her home. They wanted to scrub her existence from every picture of it. 3 days later, Jacob appeared in the morning while Ellie was brewing chamomile tea. He dropped a stack of papers on the table, his voice flat. "Mom, sign these. I need full access to the company accounts to manage Dad's affairs." Ellie scanned the pages. The words authorization, full access, immediate transfer leapt out like alarms. Reaction. She pushed the stack back, eyes blazing. "Do you think I'll sign without knowing what it means? Did you forget I managed hundreds of patient charts at once? I can read the haste in every line of this." Jacob faltered for a moment, then stiffened. "Don't make this harder. Brianna's right. You're clinging to something that doesn't belong to you." His words pierced deeper than a blade. Ellie rose unsteadily, her voice shaking. "You dare say that to me, Jacob? This is your father's life's work." Minor outcome. Jacob stormed out, leaving the papers on the table, like a grim reminder he'd return. Ellie clutched her teacup, her hand trembling so badly the liquid spilled onto the tablecloth. A tear fell with it, blending into the faded stain. Proof she was losing ground in her own life. These 3 blows in succession left Ellie cornered. She had no one to confide in but her journal. The only friend who visited, Tom Bradley, could do no more than leave a basket of oranges at her door before slipping away, glancing nervously as if someone were watching. Neighbors began to whisper. Some looked at her with pity, others avoided her altogether. Ellie realized Brianna wanted more than the house and the company. She wanted to reduce her to a shadow within her own community. That night, Ellie unlocked the wooden cabinet and pulled out the red-marked envelope Robert had left. She thought of opening it, but set it down again. Fear and exhaustion held her back. She didn't yet know that inside lay the key to reversing everything. As the last light of day faded, a sharp chime announced a new message. Ellie unlocked her phone, her heart seizing as she read the sender's name. It was from Brianna, the tone no longer disguised. "Remember this. If you refuse to sign, I'll tell the court you suffer from memory loss and lack capacity. Then everything will be ours." Ellie's eyes widened, breath quickening. These were no longer suggestions or veiled hints. This was an open threat, a direct strike. She hadn't even recovered when she realized Brianna was preparing to cross the final line. The antagonist was ready to overreach. The next morning, Ellie rose earlier than usual. 40 years of being a nurse had trained her body to wake before dawn, but this time it wasn't the bird song or sunlight that pulled her from sleep. It was the unease of Brianna's late-night threat. She had barely slept, sitting near the red-marked envelope in the cabinet, her hand brushing it, then pulling away. One thought repeated in her mind. If Robert prepared something, this is the moment I must find it. She drew in a deep breath, opened the cabinet, pulled out the envelope, and tore the seal. Inside was not a handful of documents, but a thick, carefully arranged file. On the first page, Carter Construction Trust. Ellie's heart pounded. Robert had transferred the entire business into a trust, naming her the sole beneficiary. Other papers confirmed a $350,000 home equity loan deposited directly into the trust. And at the back, a series of loan agreements bearing Jacob's signature, complete with interest rates and penalty clauses. Every sheet notarized. Her hands shook as she turned the pages. Hope sparked. Finally, a key to escape this nightmare. But just as the light broke through, the phone rang. "Mrs. Carter, this is Margaret Morrison, the accountant for Carter Construction. I need to confirm something Jacob submitted this morning." Margaret's voice was calm, but tinged with suspicion. Ellie froze. "What request?" Margaret sighed. "He sent me an email with instructions that all company operations are now to be reported directly to him. He claims you already authorized it." Ellie felt heat rush to her face, the phone trembling in her grip. "No, I never signed anything." Margaret hesitated. "That's what I thought. The email included a PDF with your signature, but it doesn't look natural. I saved it as evidence. Evidence. Internal email, 9:12 a.m. Content. From today forward, all Carter Construction financial reports will go directly to Jacob Carter. Eleanor Carter has authorized this. Attached, authorization PDF." Ellie stood frozen. They weren't just after the house. Brianna and Jacob had forged her signature to steal the company. This was the hidden scheme she had never imagined. All morning, Ellie wandered the house, clutching crumpled scraps of paper, tears streaming. Her mind was torn in two. On one side, the memory of her little boy, once gentle and kind. On the other, the reality of a man colluding with his wife to erase her. For the first time, Ellie felt like a patient trapped in a hospital bed, stripped of any say in her own fate. That afternoon, Tom Bradley stopped by. Ellie forced a smile, though her face was gaunt. Tom's eyes landed on the file spread across the table. He nodded firmly. "Mr. Robert truly did prepare. He told me if anyone but you gave orders, I wasn't to follow. He said only official paperwork counts." Ellie sat down, her voice cracking. "But they forged my signature. They'll use it to force me out." Tom shook his head. "Mrs. Ellie, these documents are the real ones. I worked with Robert long enough to know he never left loose ends. If you need me, I'll stand as your witness." Tom's words eased the sting, yet the truth was harsh. To outsiders, Brianna looked savvy. Jacob was the rightful son, and Ellie was just a frail widow. Her only allies were stacks of documents and the loyalty of one foreman. That night, Ellie arranged the files on the oak table. The trust, the HELOC, the loan agreements. Beside them, the printed email Margaret had sent her. Robert had built her a fortress of paper, but she had to decide how to wield it. She whispered as if to her late husband, "You foresaw this, didn't you, Robert? You knew a day would come when I'd have to fight?" A tear splashed onto the page, smudging the ink, yet the words, beneficiary Eleanor Carter, remained clear, like a vow carved in stone. The following day, Brianna arrived in her sharp office dress, eyes glinting. "I hear you've been digging through paperwork. It's pointless. You don't even understand what those documents mean." Jacob stood beside her, his face flickering with guilt, but his silence louder than words. Brianna leaned in, voice low enough for only Ellie to hear. "If you resist, we'll prove in court you're not competent. Who do you think they'll believe, a frail widow or a licensed legal professional?" Ellie's blood turned cold. She bit her lip hard, despair flooding her chest. It felt as though the battle was over before she had even begun. Brianna lifted her head high, tugged Jacob's arm, and walked out. The echo of her heels rang like a gavel pounding Ellie's heart. Ellie collapsed into a chair, her gaze vacant. For one agonizing moment, she truly believed she had lost. But then her eyes fell back on the neatly stacked files. These papers were not just Robert's legacy, they were weapons. They were the last wall between her and total betrayal. Ellie drew a steady breath, her grip tightening on the trust file. If her enemies wanted to use the law to destroy her, then she would use the law to fight back. This was no longer a story of endurance. It was the beginning of a quiet, deliberate revenge. In the stillness of the room, for the first time, Ellie envisioned striking back. Through the very rules and documents Robert had left behind in the Carter Construction Trust. Ellie sat quietly in the living room, the morning light spilling across the oak table where Robert's documents lay neatly stacked. They weren't just dry pages anymore. They were his legacy, his final message to her. She understood that to survive, to protect her dignity, she had to turn them into a weapon. In her mind, she called it a 4-step path: collect, align, gamble, and edge. As a former head nurse, Ellie had spent decades documenting every case, every prescription in precise detail. Now she applied that same discipline to gathering proof. On the oak table, she arranged piles: the Carter Construction Trust papers with beneficiary Eleanor Carter printed clearly, the $350,000 home equity loan records showing funds transferred into the trust, the signed loan agreements from Jacob with interest and penalties attached, and the printed copy of the forged email Margaret had given her. For days, Ellie scanned each page using the old machine in Robert's office, saving them to her hard drive and backing them onto a USB she hid inside an old pillbox no one would ever touch. She carefully annotated dates and lines, making sure no detail was overlooked. For her, this wasn't just evidence, it was survival itself. When she met Helen Patterson at the bank, Ellie spread the documents out. Helen reviewed them, then nodded. "Everything here is valid. If necessary, I'll testify that these accounts belong to you." It was the first brick in Ellie's wall of defense. Alone, Ellie could never withstand Brianna, sharp in law and ruthless in tactics. She needed to rally those still loyal to Robert. At the small office in town, Margaret Morrison flipped through the financial reports. "Robert wanted to protect you. He documented Jacob's debts clearly. I've safeguarded these records for years." Ellie reached across the desk, her voice firm. "I need you on my side. They're trying to paint me as incompetent." Margaret met her eyes. "Numbers don't lie. I'll stand as witness." In the familiar kitchen, Tom Bradley laid his calloused hands over the file, his voice unwavering. "Robert told me directly, if anyone but you tried to give orders, I was to refuse. I'll stand by you no matter what." Ellie felt her heart steady, at last a human anchor. Finally, attorney James Patterson read through every document, his gaze sharp. "You have clear advantages, but be prepared. They'll try to flip the narrative, claim you've lost capacity. I'll draft responses in advance." Ellie nodded. "Then we'll prepare down to the last detail." With Helen, Margaret, Tom, and James, she had her circle. They were her wall of flesh and truth. To test how far her enemies might go, Ellie decided to provoke them. One morning, Jacob arrived with another stack of papers, pressing her to sign away the company. Ellie sat calmly at the kitchen table, the trust file open before her. "Jacob, what authority do you think you have here?" he stammered. "I'm the rightful heir." Ellie turned the page and pointed. "The beneficiary is Eleanor Carter. The company is not part of the estate. It belongs to me." Jacob's face drained of color. He reached for the documents, but Ellie was quicker, pulling them back. "If you want to discuss, bring your lawyer. Tom will follow my orders from now on. You no longer hold authority." Jacob stormed out, phone in hand. From the living room, Ellie heard Brianna shouting through the speaker. "She's defying us. If we wait, everything slips away." It was exactly what Ellie needed. The enemy pushed into reckless haste. Ellie began securing her edge. She recorded every call, saved every threatening message. One full set of documents was sealed by Helen in a bank vault. Each night, Ellie opened her journal, logging dates, words, expressions. Every move Brianna and Jacob made became ink on paper. Inside Robert's red-marked envelope, there was one final document Ellie hadn't shared with anyone, not even her closest allies. It was her last safeguard, a piece of evidence strong enough to turn the tide if everything else failed. She promised herself she would only use it at the breaking point. Ellie knew her plan was like walking a tightrope. Brianna could accuse her of memory loss, pushing the court to strip her rights. Tom could be tempted or pressured with promises of profit. Margaret might be dragged into legal crossfire. And most frightening of all, if any document was called into doubt, the entire wall Robert built could collapse. One evening, sitting with James, Ellie voiced her fears. He leaned forward. "You've prepared well, but they won't sit quietly. They'll use every weapon, even the dirtiest tricks." Ellie clasped her hands, her voice resolute. "I've watched patients fight for every breath. I'll fight the same. This is my battle." Outside, wind swept through the lavender garden, bending brittle stems like omens of storm. Ellie gazed through the window, a quiet strength surging in her chest. She had the plan, the allies, the gamble set. Everything was in place for the showdown to come. But that very night, the phone rang. Margaret's voice came urgent, trembling. "Ellie, it's critical. Jacob just filed a petition in court to declare you legally incompetent. They want to strip your authority immediately." The plan that had seemed unshakable now stood on the edge of collapse. Ellie sat in the living room, the oak table before her, the same table where Robert once read the morning paper. She drew a deep breath, closed her eyes, and repeated the 4 steps of revenge she had mapped out: collect, align, gamble, and edge. It was time to put everything into motion. Step 1. Collect and secure the evidence. Ellie began by reinforcing every file. Each original document was scanned, duplicated, and stored. With Helen's help at the bank, she secured a private safety box containing the trust papers, the home equity loan agreement, Jacob's loan contracts, and the forged email. Every night, Ellie wrote in her journal, logging dates, events, and the emotions tied to them. She recorded Brianna's threats, Jacob's silence, and the arrival of the real estate agents. Each page became living proof, a narrative James could later present in court. When she handed James a USB containing the complete scans, he nodded. "Mrs. Carter, this is enough to build a wall of defense, but brace yourself, they'll counterattack with everything they've got." Step 2. Align and build loyalty. Ellie visited each ally. At her small office, Margaret Morrison handed her 5 years of financial reports. "Every dollar Jacob borrowed is here, signed and recorded. I've kept them intact." Ellie squeezed her hand, eyes misty. "You have no idea how much this means." At the job site, Tom Bradley paused amid clattering machines, resting his rough hand on Ellie's shoulder. "Robert trusted me, and I won't betray that. If it goes to court, I'll testify. Jacob always came sniffing around after big payments." The promise gave Ellie strength. Helen handled the quiet work. She helped Ellie set up a separate account to clearly track trust income. "If they argue you're unfit with finances, I'll testify otherwise," she said. Finally, James gathered them one evening, laying out every document on the table. "Each of you is a piece of the puzzle. Together, we make a picture they cannot deny." Ellie saw the determination in their eyes and knew Robert had chosen his allies wisely. Step 3. Gamble. Confront false power. When Jacob swaggered into the company office with fake authorization papers, Ellie was ready. She appeared with Tom and Margaret, in full view of the staff. As Jacob declared himself the rightful heir, Ellie calmly unfolded the trust papers. "This company has belonged to the trust for 5 years. The beneficiary is me, not you." Jacob's face flushed red. He reached for the documents, but Ellie pulled them back. "If you want to talk, bring your lawyer. Tom answers only to me now. You have no authority left." The confrontation left Jacob humiliated. That same day, a staff member recorded the scene and sent the video to Ellie. Evidence. Phone video, 2:05 p.m., showing Ellie confronting Jacob at the company office as he fails to produce valid papers. The gamble worked. Jacob's credibility cracked. But Brianna struck back immediately, filing a petition to have Ellie declared legally incompetent. Exactly the counter James had warned her about. Step 4. Edge. Adapt inside the courtroom. The hearing took place in Sonoma County. Brianna entered confident, arms clutching a thick folder. Jacob sat beside her, avoiding his mother's eyes. Their weapon, the forged authorization. The judge asked sternly, "Mrs. Carter, do you deny this is your signature?" Ellie lifted her chin. "Yes, I do. I never signed this." Brianna leapt in. "She's confused, Your Honor. She signed in front of us." James rose, sliding the printed email across the table. "The timestamp proves this PDF was created after Mr. Carter's death. And here is the original trust, notarized 5 years ago, showing Mrs. Carter as sole authority." The tension thickened. The judge called a recess to review. Ellie's relief was short-lived. Her phone buzzed. Margaret's frantic message, "My office was broken into. Original loan contracts are gone, including Jacob's debts." Ellie's chest clenched. Without those contracts, she couldn't prove Jacob owed nearly $100,000. Brianna glanced at her across the courtroom, the faintest smile curling her lips. For a moment, Ellie felt everything slipping, but then she remembered the old pillbox. Inside it, the USB. Every loan agreement scanned, signed, and time-stamped. She leaned to James and whispered, "We still have the copies." James quickly requested to present electronic evidence. On the big screen, the contracts appeared. Jacob's signatures, clear dates, firm interest terms. The judge turned sharply. "Do you deny these are yours, Mr. Carter?" Jacob stammered, sweat dripping. Brianna tried to cut in, but the gavel's crack silenced her. The courtroom erupted. Ellie closed her eyes, sensing Robert's presence beside her. She had survived the major setback because of her foresight. The hearing wasn't over. The advantage leaned her way, but Brianna's eyes stayed sharp, lips twitching as she whispered to Jacob. Ellie shivered. They still had one more card to play. She clutched the trust file tightly, inhaling. She knew the battle would end with just one last move. The Sonoma County courtroom was packed that morning. The air was so heavy that every breath Ellie took seemed burdensome. Across the aisle, Brianna sat with her arms crossed, eyes sharp as blades, lips curled into a smug smile. Beside her, Jacob kept his head down, his hands clenched tightly together. They believed that a petition of incapacity would be enough to erase their mother from the board entirely. The judge struck the gavel. Today we are hearing the case concerning Carter Construction and the Carter family estate. The plaintiffs allege that Mrs. Eleanor Carter lacks the capacity to manage her assets. Does the defense have a response? James Patterson stood on Ellie's behalf. His voice was steady. "Your Honor, we have clear evidence proving not only that Mrs. Carter is entirely competent, but also that she has been deliberately undermined with forged documents and intimidation." Brianna immediately cut in. "This woman is no longer lucid. She signs papers without remembering. We are only trying to protect the family's assets." Ellie rose to her feet. For the first time, her voice rang through the courtroom. "Family assets or your ambition?" The silence was absolute. Every eye turned toward her. Revealing the truth through a chain of evidence, James raised his hand and the projector flicked on. Each piece of evidence struck like a hammer blow against Brianna's mask. First evidence, Jacob's text message to Ellie right after the funeral dinner. Evidence, text message, 6:45 p.m. Content, "Mom, Brianna already spoke with the realtor. 2 weeks is enough to pack up." James read it aloud, then looked up. "This is psychological coercion, delivered before the funeral flowers had even wilted." Second evidence, the realtor's call log. Evidence, call log, 3:22 p.m. Content, "Mrs. Carter, I'm the realtor. Please have the house ready for photos." Ellie swallowed hard, speaking slowly. "They turned my home into a commodity when my husband had been buried only 7 days." Third evidence, a forged email with Ellie's signature, sent to accountant Margaret. Evidence email, 9:12 a.m. Content, "Send reports directly to Jacob Carter. Eleanor has approved." Margaret took the stand and confirmed. "I received this email, but recognized it was fake. The timestamp was off and the signature didn't match." Fourth evidence, a cell phone video showing Jacob unable to provide authorization at the company. Evidence, cell phone video, 2:05 p.m., recording Ellie demanding authorization from Jacob, who had none. The courtroom murmured. Jacob kept his head bowed, his face burning red, unable to speak a word. The judge struck the gavel, voice stern. "The evidence shows clear acts of forgery and coercion, but does it fully establish ownership?" James smiled, as if waiting for this moment. He glanced at Ellie. She nodded. The final card, the last secret. Ellie stepped to the witness stand, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes ablaze. "Robert, my husband, didn't just create the trust. He also secured a home equity loan worth $350,000. That money was transferred directly into the Carter Construction Trust. I have the original documents." James lifted the folder before the court. The documents bore notarized stamps from the bank. The judge reviewed them carefully, then nodded. Ellie continued, voice firm. "That means this house is no longer an asset you can sell. It is part of the trust, and this trust has only one beneficiary, me." The courtroom fell silent. Brianna's face drained of color, her lips pressed tight. Jacob looked up, eyes wide with confusion. This was Robert's final move, the shield he left behind to protect his wife from betrayal. The judge struck the gavel hard. The court's ruling. 1. The petition challenging Eleanor Carter's capacity is dismissed. 2. Carter Construction Trust is upheld as valid, with Mrs. Eleanor Carter as sole beneficiary. 3. Jacob Carter's loan agreements are recognized as binding, with current debt totaling approximately $96,000. Mr. Jacob Carter must comply with an 8-year repayment plan. Should he default, Wages may be garnished and liens placed on property. 4. The family home falls within the trust and cannot be disposed of by the plaintiffs. The final gavel fell like thunder. The courtroom erupted. Some even stood to applaud. Ellie closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks, but a soft smile spread across her lips. Brianna shot to her feet, voice shrieking, "Impossible! She deceived everyone. I'll appeal." But the judge's eyes were cold as he addressed her. "You forged signatures and manipulated documents. Consider yourself fortunate this case hasn't been referred to the district attorney." Jacob slumped into his chair, stunned. He was no longer the man who once declared, "This house isn't yours, Mom," but a debtor's son, now bound to repay every dollar with his wages and his pride. Ellie turned toward them. Her voice was calm but sharp as steel. "Robert loved and protected me until his last breath. He thought you could erase me, but the law and his preparation have shown me how to rise. This is justice. This is the price you pay." The fallout was immediate. Local papers headlined, "Widow wins case against son and daughter-in-law, retains control of construction company." Ellie's honor was restored, while Brianna and Jacob became the town's scandal. They no longer had any hold over the company. Their plan to sell the home collapsed, and Jacob's 8-year debt plan hung like chains around his neck. Ellie walked out of the courthouse, inhaling deeply the crisp air of freedom. In her heart, she heard Robert's voice like a whisper, "You did it." Justice served, and justice fulfilled. Yet in Ellie's eyes lingered a glint of frost. This victory was not just the end of a family feud. It was a reminder that sometimes, to preserve dignity and freedom, a woman must rise and fight with everything she has. The verdict from the Sonoma County Court quickly spread across the town of Santa Rosa. For Brianna, once proud to call herself an ambitious legal assistant, the truth now exposed before the public destroyed her entire reputation. No office wanted to employ someone tied to forged signatures and asset manipulation. Each time she walked down the street, sneers and whispered remarks trailed behind her like a shadow she could never shake. Her reputation was nothing but ashes. Jacob faced a different punishment, the crushing weight of debt hanging over him every single day. Each month, his wages were garnished to pay down nearly $100,000. Banks refused him any new loans, and friends slowly distanced themselves. His marriage to Brianna fractured, constant arguments tearing apart a household that had been built on ambition. Now it collapsed quickly under the strain. These were long-term consequences, a wound that would not easily heal. For Ellie, however, a new chapter began. She sold the old house, on her own terms, under her control, not theirs, and moved into a small cottage by the coast in Jenner. There, she found peace in the sound of waves and the glow of sunsets. Each quarter, Tom Bradley sent her reports from Carter Construction, showing the company remained steady. She no longer feared losing her security, no longer felt like a stranger inside her own home. This was her new life, simple, but entirely her own. From time to time, Jacob sent handwritten letters. In them, he confessed regret, describing his effort in marriage counseling, his attempts to repay his debt faithfully, and his hope that one day he might see his mother again. Ellie would read them, then tuck them into a drawer. She didn't reply immediately, but a glimmer of humanity flickered in her eyes. Because despite the pain, she still hoped that one day her lost son could return to the family through genuine repentance. Kindness needs boundaries and signatures. Goodness does not mean weakness. Eleanor Carter's story was not just a legal battle, but a testament to the power of preparation and resilience. A widow who seemed fragile used lawful documents and her own courage to defend her dignity, autonomy, and the legacy her husband left behind. Justice was finally served, and the message is clear. Love deeply, but never allow your kindness to be turned into a weapon against you. If you have ever felt betrayed, dismissed, or stripped of what was rightfully yours, what would you do? Would you stay silent and endure, or would you rise like Ellie, reclaiming justice with the strength already in your hands? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear each of your answers. And don't forget to subscribe to True Revenge Stories, hit like, and share this video so more people can hear these gripping stories of revenge that carry powerful human lessons. Every day, we bring you a new revenge story, designed to both entertain and make you reflect. And if you want to continue this journey, head over to our playlist, where even more shocking and dramatic stories are waiting for you.